Hello. In this video, we're going to begin creating a full React chat, what we're going to call React Chat. So this is going to demonstrate how we can take React concepts and syntax that have been covered in sort of other videos and sort of in the readings and so forth, and be able to get those to all integrate together into an actual application. We're going to build it slowly and iteratively, showing off sort of introducing different concepts kind of as we go. So in this first video, we're going to focus on just putting together the components that are really needed to display the content. We'll deal with interactivity and such later. All right, so the app that we're going to build is a chat application. Think similar to Discord or Teams or Slack or something like that. What we're going to do is we're going to basically build out an application that's going to let us be able to post messages and send messages and sort of chat with other people at the same time. Great. So the first step, we want to build out a React application is to specify what content we want to see and what components we should have. So the way that we'll generally think about doing that is taking sort of your vision for what you want your app to look like imagine this screenshot of Discord, and thinking, what are the components? What are the parts, the pieces of that application? Turn my little annotator here. So we can imagine trying to break this apart into sections. I often think about this in terms of boxes, right? Sections, parts of the page. So things that might jump out of you, right? Like we've got this one section sort of along the side here that's like my list of different servers that I can belong to. I've got sort of a list of channels or sort of different threads that I can be part of. I've got a sort of overall section where I can actually do my messaging and my chatting, right? That's got my sort of my messages and then as well as my sort of form, which actually can get broken apart, right? We should imagine that here's like the form itself, right? That's a piece of work that needs to happen. I want to be able to figure out how to type in that text. We can also then have all these different messages, and like we might have messages, right? There's a message, here's a message, and those messages are sort of the same, they're copies of the same component, right? They're the same thing. It's just we have multiple copies of them, right? We have message, 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 message. So we can imagine having a single message type that we can have and then lots of different versions of. And then finally, of course, we've got like our user lists along the side. We've got some sort of heading stuff along the top here that we can include as well. So you can see how we're sort of taking our vision and breaking it apart into different parts and different components, each of which can be focused on their own individual piece. We're not going to build a full Discord level complex application. We're going to build sort of a very simplified version of it. So our application is not going to have quite that level of complexity. What we're going to really be focusing on here is, I'll use the red here, is we're going to be really focusing on sort of having a channel list. We'll have a heading area at the top. We'll have messages and all of our message pane work and all of our form work. So we're going to sort of ignore the existing of different servers. We're not going to keep track of online users, but we're going to sort of have the other middle pieces of this application. All right, so once we have an idea of what we want our pieces to be, we can actually begin going and trying to put that into code. So we might start at a very, very high level. So, well, we're going to start, we'll keep this view. So I've got a basic React scaffolding that we built up, similar to how we've talked about in terms of setting up a React application. At the moment, it's just rendering an app component. So we've got a sort of initial starting app component, and our app component is just returning, showing a div with the words React Chat, right? Like there's no actual content on this page yet. So what we can imagine doing is trying to sort of sketch out what is this application going to look like? What components might it have? So what we can sort of imagine is instead of having a div that contains sort of the words React Chat, that's not going to be part of our content anymore. We can imagine that our app is going to be made up of something. We're going to do this all in sort of comments because we need to figure out what it looks like, right? It's going to have something like a header bar, right? Because we want to have some sort of heading section at the top, which will be able to have some things like navigation and menus and other kinds of pieces that go along with it, right? We know that we're going to want to have a channel list, which is going to be our list of different channels that are going to be able to show up. Right? That's our channeling list here. We then know that we're going to have a message area. I'm going to call it a message pane. Pane, like a pane of glass in a window. It's sort of it's a user interface term that refers to a section of a user interface. So this is going to be a pane, our message pane. But really inside of our message pane, I might have then lots of different message elements or message item elements. Right, I can have lots of these different things that go together. Right, we'll have lots of different messages, and of course, they'll all have their own sets of details around how they work. Of course, underneath all those messages, I'm then going to want to have my composing form. I know it's the name because I planned out this demo. And like that will be then part of the sort of messaging area, right? Has my composing form in it. Right. So that's the end of my message pane. And then of course that's the end of my page. So what we're basically doing is sketching out what are the different components we might have and actually writing them out as XML. We haven't created them all yet, but at least we've sort of noted out in pseudocode, this is the kind of content I want to see so that I can know how I want to put that thing together. Awesome. So once we've got that put together, we can actually start building out these pieces. We can start creating this content. So we've got our app that we're putting out together. Check my notes to make sure we're doing this right. So the first component that we had in here is our header bar. Great. So let's make ourselves a header bar. Generally, we want to put each kind of new component, each separate component inside of its own module, right? Inside of its own file, just in order to help keep those things separated and sort of organized together. We don't want to make a really, really long file. We have to scroll up and down. We want to be able to put them in different places. So we can go ahead and make ourselves a new header bar module, right? We can call it whatever we want. I'm often going to name them after the component that's inside of them. So that's fine. This could be my header bar. We're going to find our function, right? So this is going to be function header bar that takes in some props, right? Because remember, that's how all components are defined. They're always defined as a function, written as a function declaration, the name of a component, and then props is our argument. And of course, then we can say, what does this thing look like? Right, where return is going to be what a header bar looks like. And so our header bar can be really basic. Maybe it's got a header element inside of it. And maybe in that header, we've got an H1 that can just say the name of our app, like React Chat. And there's our piece. So we've got our header bar. We've defined it. It's great. We can then go back into our app and say, yep, let's actually go ahead and include that header bar inside the div. The rest of the stuff is I'm leaving as commented out because we're not dealing with it yet, but we've now got a header bar inside of our div. So we can go to our page to see it render. And of course, as I refresh the page, it doesn't render. And the error that we're getting is that the header bar has not been defined, which doesn't make sense. We just created it. But that's happening from app, right? If we look at in our console, we can see that's happening from app at line 5, right? So in app, header bar is not defined because from the app module's perspective, header bar doesn't exist. It doesn't know that that's been created in some other file, some other module. So we need to make sure that we take this component and we export it so that other people can use it. Other modules are able to use that function, that component. And then we're going to make sure we import it, right, from the header bar.js file. And now we have our header bar that shows up there at the top. Great. We can, of course, do more work to this. We might say, let's customize maybe what this looks like a little bit. Let's close down this so we get some more room. All right, we can give it some class, some styling work here. I'm going to give some bootstrap classes. A little bit of a margin, or a little bit of padding. We've loaded in bootstrap in our index.js, so we imported the bootstrap CSS, so that's part of what we can work with. I can give it some styling and make it actually look like a nice little header bar. Ta-da! There's React Chat. And that's a really basic component. Again, there's not a lot to this. And we can add in more details later if we decide we want to do more stuff in the header bar, in that navigation area, in other kinds of menuing options. We can add that stuff in later to this component without having to worry about what's happening to the rest of my application. Great. So that makes our header bar. Done. So the next thing that we want to have under a header bar is we want to have a channel list. So we can do the same kind of behavior, right? We're going to do channel list next. We're going to do channel list next. So I can make, again, a new component. This can be my channel list.js. That's my new module. I'm going to create my component, which will be a channel list, props. And that can then be my list of my channels. So what goes into a channel list? Well, we basically want this to be a list. I mean, if we look at our sort of model, we want it to be roughly a list of channels, and we should be able to click on each one to jump to that channel. So because we want to click on them, that basically means they're links, and we want to sort of have like a list of links. So we're going to kind of build it out that way. So we can say, what does this thing look like? Well, at the highest possible level, it's going to be an unordered list. It's going to contain a bunch of list items inside of it, right, for different channels we want. This whole thing's about navigation, so maybe we should go ahead and wrap it inside of a nav element, not a mav element, but a nav element. All right, just kind of keep this thing organized. Cool. Let's see. Let's put some content in here. This is going to be channel 1, channel 2, channel 3, right? And again, we're just writing out the HTML, and I'm sketching things out quickly as we go. It doesn't really matter how clean or nice it is at the moment. I'm just trying to kind of get stuff in there to get the scaffolding in place. Again, it's not showing up yet because we want to make sure we do render it. It means we need to export the channel list so that the app can use it. In app, we're then going to want to import my channel list so that I can then actually include it as a thing that I'm rendering. And with that in place, there we go. I have a list of channels inside my application. We can do some more work to this, right? We can add some styling to it just to again make it look a little bit, just to be able to sort of follow along what's happening a little bit. I'm going to do this one in text white. The background is secondary. I've got some notes about the padding we want, so I'm going to add some pieces right there. There we go. And that creates a sort of a channel list with sort of a grayish background and white text, just again, sort of separate out that component so we can see what it looks like. All right, so we've got our different channel lists here, right? There's a bunch of list items. And we can imagine that I've called these channel 1, channel 2, channel 3. You can imagine calling these something more similar to what you might see on a Discord server or in a chat server, right? So maybe this guy is general, maybe this guy is the social channel, maybe this is the random channel. This is going to be the birds channel, and so forth. Right, we can add in these various channels. Cool. There we go. Right. Again, as we make changes to our content, we're seeing changes in our application itself. Of course, we want these to be links, right? We want them to be hyperlinks to be able to get to them. So we can, of course, do some styling there. So general is going to be an anchor element. At the, let's give it an href. Where is it going to go to? I want to go to the general channel. So I'm actually going to put a link to sort of the general path. So we'll deal with routing and we'll deal with sort of structuring and like where things go to later. But for now, you can imagine this is going to go to the sort of the general location, right? / general. There's my A. And of course, then this one would go to social. Social. The A. Sorry. What I do? Oh, this is A close together. Great. Right, and so that's then creating our links source. Of course, I need to now style these in a different way. And as you notice, it's starting to get redundant, right? I'm starting to write out the same content over and over again. Where really, I want each of these list items to look kind of similar. So what I can do is instead of, for example, trying to just write out the same list item over and over and over and over again, I can use the fact that we're inside of JavaScript to be able to programmatically generate what these things are. So if I instead come out here and say, let's come up with a list of channel names that can be an array, a list, really, of the different names we have. We had general, we had social, we had random, we had birds, right? So I've got my list of strings, right? It's a list of strings, and what I want is then going to be a list of li elements, right? An array, not a list, an array of li elements, which we can get by doing some basic mapping work, right? I can map from this array of strings into an array of li elements. So let's do that. We're going to create our new element array by taking our channel names and mapping each channel name string, which I'm being really explicit about the data type here, just so I know what I'm talking about. And we're going to map that into something. So our transformed version of this, following our sort of mapping, our sort of map pattern and template, it's going to be an li element. It's actually, I'm just going to copy and paste this. This is really what we're doing, right? It's going to be one of these li elements. Right, it's an li, that's an anchor element in the middle of it. Li, and there's the end. Yeah. Right. And now I can, of course, begin customizing this as well. So I can say that I want this to have a class. I can say what I want the style coloring to be. Let's make sure this text is white. We know this href isn't actually going to always be to general, and this text isn't going to be general, right? So this is going to be to the channel name string, right? That's what we're going to link to. And then the path itself is going to be a / followed by that channel name string. So again, I'm using inline expressions here to be able to programmatically make it so that each one of these li anchors are going to be slightly different. Cool. Now that we have all those different array elements, I can then replace my link inside of this UL with that array of elements, with my elm array. And with that, it just, oh, we gotta remember, don't forget to hit return the transformed. That's what I'm actually looking for. Gotta make sure we return that so it gets added to my new map. And with that in place, now I have all my different content, right? All my different elements, and they all have the same text, and they all have the same links, and I can be able to adjust them as I need it, right? If I decide I want them all to not be white, but instead to be blue, right? I can make them all blue all at once by changing it in a single place. That's one of the benefits of using React. Of course, we notice in our console here that we have a warning, right? I forgot to give, because I have a list of elements, I forgot to give each of them a unique prop. As always, as soon as you see a warning here, immediately go fix that warning. Don't let it sit and deal with it later, because otherwise you're going to miss actual errors. So in this case, I have a list of li elements, so I need to put the key property on those li elements, not on the anchor elements, right, but on the lis, because that's what's a list of. Those lis happen to have anchors inside of them, but we want to make the key be on the list item itself. And I'm going to make the key be the channel name string itself, because that should be unique. We can't have two channels with the same name. Cool. And with that, we've got ourselves to have a list of channel names. And again, we're able to then do some data work to sort of do this programmatically, which makes it a little bit easier to actually write out the whole list of things, or make this more complex, but I only have to write it out one at a time. Great. Cool. So that gives us our header bar and then our channel list. The next piece is that we wanted to have our messages and all of our message pane. So that's going to be a new piece. So let's go ahead and make ourselves a new sort of message pane component or a page module. This will be my, oh, there we go. File. Message pane.js. All right. Inside here, I'm going to have my function that's going to be my message pane, some props. And of course, I'm going to make sure to export this so that we can be able to see it as well. Cool. So what this is going to look like, right, roughly, is it's going to look like this, right? It's going to be all this content here. Right. Oh my gosh, I keep hitting the wrong button. Excuse me. Right. So it's going to be that content, and then as my message pane is getting exported, I can go ahead and put it into my app by importing it into the message pane. And then I'm just going to have my message pane be part of my app here. Cool. I'm getting error because at the moment message pane doesn't actually return anything. So let's just put something here as placeholder. Oops. What's the problem here? Fine. It needs to be a div. You have something to wrap it all together. There we go. Now it's all in place. Okay. I know I'm jumping back and forth between modules, all right? You know, where I was trying to just sort of define what my message pane looks like, and then I immediately went to app in order to import it and render it, right, as a component, and then immediately jumping back. That's a little bit how building in React works, is that you're going to be sort of jumping between creating the component, right, creating the function, and then where you go and use that component. Generally, once you've got sort of the scaffolding in place, then we can begin focusing on one piece. Right now, I only need to worry about message pane because I've got it hooked up into app, right? So as soon as there's some content in here, right, there's some message there, it does show up on the page, so I don't need to worry about that anymore. All right, so there's my message pane. And we know my message pane then contains a bunch of message items and a compose form. Well, I know I'm going to have a bunch of message items here, so I can actually go ahead and just create that component and say, let's have a bunch of message items. So in order to do that, I'm going to create another component, message item, to define what one of these things looks like. Now, I'm not putting this into a different module because the message item is really part of the message pane itself in many ways, right? There's nothing different there. It's the message pane in many ways just containing the message item. So I don't need to separate them out. I could if I wanted to, that would work fine. It's not going to be a problem. But often keeping sort of components that are related or only used together inside of the same module can make your life a lot easier. that's kind of an art or styling to how you want to organize your components. There's no one right answer, just sort of things to keep in mind as you're building this. All right, so here's our message item component. It needs to return some. I know. Fine. Just try to ignore the warning arrows. We do some actual work. So what's a message item look like? Well, our message item is going to have a picture. It's got a name, and then the message itself. Okay, we can sort of build that out together. So this is going to be a div, right, to hold the whole message item. I know I need to have an image. It's going to be my picture here. I know I only want to have then a paragraph of some kind that's going to be the name. Let's call this like, I don't know, Joel. Right? That's our name. And then I want to have some actual text. Hello world, right? That's kind of our rough structuring for how it wants to work. And of course, if I do that, and then I can go ahead and say, let's go ahead and include a message item in here. All right, so now there's a message item inside my message pane. I go to see what it looks like. Right, there's my message, Joel, hello world, roughly. All right, well, let's build this out. So we've got an image. Clearly, we need to have a source for it. We need to know what we want our picture to be. Well, in the starter code, I have created a set of, in my public folder, I've downloaded some images that we can use as like user icons. These are pictures of different birds and animals that I borrowed from the Mac operating system. So we're going to basically be able to use that as well. So what that means is I could, for example, have my source be a link to this eagle picture inside of the image folder. So we can say, go into the image folder. I'm using actually an absolute path. I don't want to do it, well, from where we start. It's fine. Yeah, it's fine. And then in there, go find the eagle picture.png. And I want that to be my image. There's my eagle. It's an image. We have to include alt. So this is going to be eagle's avatar picture. Right. Of course, the name of this is now not Joel. It's going to be Eagle. And of course, the paragraph that he's going to say is going to be, he'll say, so hello world. That's fine. Again, you notice that as I'm changing this, I'm now able to modify my message. Cool. So this is giving me some content, some structure that I can be able to display. Of course, this looks like garbage. So we want to be able to, spend. So it's often worth saying, okay, as I'm building out this component, let's go ahead and clean it up, make it look a little bit better. So things that we can do for this, for example, let's go ahead and we want to put the image alongside the text. We want the text to be next to the image. The easiest way to do that is actually to use something like a Flexbox to be able to organize that together. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to create a little div to hold my image itself. To hold the image and sort of the username to go next to each other. Yes. Yeah. No. Yes, we'll do that. Right. Trying to check both my notes in terms of where we ended up and actually build the thing we go. Cool. So I'm going to make that a div, and I want this thing to be sitting, sort of have the text be sitting side by side. So I can go ahead and just make it a Flexbox, give it a deflex, and that now puts my name and my image right next to each other, which is kind of cool, right? That's now starting to look together. Of course, we can then do some class styling on this. We put a little space between them. All right, so they're like kind of next to each other. And then, of course, I have my text immediately below that to have all that stuff come together. Great. So that's starting to look together. We can, of course, customize this a little bit well. We can even do that by modifying the CSS itself, right? I can go write some CSS code. Give me a second to go double check what exactly I want my CSS code to look like. And what I can actually do is I say I want to modify what this image looks like. So I want to write some CSS. I don't want to just apply to all images. I want to give this image a particular class. I'm going to go ahead and just give this whole message thing a class of message. Oh, sorry, class name message. Just because that way I can refer to sort of all this content all at once. Right, so there's my class of message. And then, of course, I can then talk about the inside that message element. I can talk about its image. And with this image, of course, I can do things like give it a width of 50 pixels, a height of 50 pixels, and a border radius that's 50%. And then ta-da, I can get a little nice rounded icon image for my eagle. Cool, looks fine. This is a name. I can go ahead and like make it strong, make it bold, make it emphasize, just to make sure it shows up a little better. And again, right now we've got ourselves, we're making kind of a nice little message. Can have some padding around it, maybe. How about maybe a little margin? 2. I don't know. Like we can be able to customize sort of what this looks like. But that there is now a message, which means that because that's a single message, I can actually have lots of them in a row, right? I can actually have lots and lots of messages all over. And now Eagle is posting over and over and over again, hello world, which is fine. Good for Eagle, right? Good job for him. But that's able to create my content. Excellent. All right, so there's some messages. Now, of course, our next step is that we don't want to just actually show these messages to always be Eagle saying hello world. I'd like to be able to customize it in some different way, right? I want to be able to have each message have a different set of text or a different set of a different user, a different message. And we can do that by using props. So what we're going to do is we're going to specify what we want the content of each of these messages to be and pass it down as a prop. So for example, this message item, we might say he's from a user, has a username of Eagle and some text of hello world. But we want this guy to have a username that's parrot and have his text be squawk, which I cannot actually spell. No, maybe that's right. Squawk, 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 squawk. There we go, squawk. So now I can have each message being showing something slightly different. Of course, these props are then going to get passed into the component, and they're going to show up inside this props component, this props argument. So again, if I console log out the props here, see what they look like. Right, you'll see that I'm getting one object that contains the username and the text for Eagle and hello world, one that has the username for the use name. Notice that we got to make sure we type these correctly. For parrot and squawk, and then one that's empty because I'm actually not passing any props to this message item. Cool. We will often want to destructure these values out of the props so we can begin using them. So I can then, of course, define my username and my text to be coming from this props argument. So this is my destructuring behavior. And now, inside of here, instead of having the username be Eagle, I can actually use that variable. Instead of having this text be this text, I can use that text variable. And with that, I'm now getting different people posting different things. Of course, I need to fix the image comments as well. And we can do that, and we'll do that in a moment. So this is going to let me be able to have multiple messages, each with their own different set of data. Now, I could keep typing in a bunch of different message items here to make that work. That's going to get tedious pretty quickly. So often what you want to do is that because this is data that we're showing, right? I want to show like a list of messages and I need some content, some data for those messages. We'll often want to define that somewhere else so that we can load it and use it. The other thing that I've created here inside my source code is I've created a JSON file that is a chat log. It's chatlog.json. And what this is an array of objects where each object represents a message that could be sent by these various creatures sometime in the past. I made this up, right? I sat down one day and just wrote out a bunch of JSON. I specified a bunch of messages, right? This isn't like automatically generated. I didn't download it from anywhere. I just went ahead and made myself a couple of fake messages that I can use to test my application, right? That I can sort of work with, or just like sample data. Because this is a JSON file, we can actually load this content directly into our JavaScript. We can actually import it just like it was another module. And we can do that because we're within the sort of the React structure. So I can load in the chatlog.json as a default import, right? So I could have my default chat log by importing that value from the data chatlog.json. Now, because message pane is inside components, in order to get to data, I have to go up a directory. So the correct path here is that I need to go up a directory into chatlog.json. Cool. And now that I have my default chat log, right, I can now do some work with that, right? So I can now say that my username is now go to my default. You're gonna hit me for a moment. I'll fix it in a second. We'll go to my default chat log, go to it, index the element at index 0, and then get the username from that, which of course you see changes it to penguin in my output because the chat log, my first person is penguin. All right, this sounds a little bit terrible. I don't have to keep breaking this apart. So what if we instead just pass in a single value that can be instead of passing in two different props, username and text, let's just pass in a message data prop that can just be a single object, right? We can just pass in the default chat log 0th element. I'm not passing in these pieces in particular. Great. So now instead of destructuring from props, I'm actually going to say go into props, then go into the message data prop that we're now. Well, here, let's slow this down for a second. You're going to crash for a second. That's fine. Actually, I'm gonna comment out a whole bunch of things here just because I want to make sure it's not going to crash otherwise. Oh, you stopped. Oops, because I got an extra div here. All right, you. Right, so what's happening here is now I'm getting my props, right? It's getting passed into this first prop here, object here, is a prop whose object has message data, and inside of message data, there's another object that's message data. So I can, for example, get that value, right? I can say get the message data by going to my props and accessing the message data value from it. And then I can get the username and text out of that message data, right? Doing my destructuring. So there's sort of two steps to get the values I wanted, but that's getting me the things that I need. Username is undefined. Are you sure? Oh, probably because this guy doesn't have, these ones don't have it yet. So here, let's go back to having one that works and we'll fill in the other two. Okay, I know there's a lot of like adding things in, time them out, trying to make sure that things run. Part of this is because I'm building it out kind of like separately to go through each step. If you know what you're doing ahead of time, you'll be able to sort of build it out and you'll have less of problems. All right, so in this case, I can now get the source picture by accessing that from my, well, here, what else can I get from my message data? I've got username, I've got text, I've also got a user image. That seems valuable. So you can grab that information as well. So then my source here can just be the user image. Penguin, right? I've already got username and I've got text. So then I've got Penguin's message, hello, it's so cold out today. Okay. And of course, we can build out more of these, right? I can have one be for each different message out of my chat log. Now I've got a whole bunch of different messages that are showing up. Of course, I'm now accessing individual messages of an array. That's really annoying. So what I can do instead is, again, go back to using map to structure this whole thing out together. So I have my chat log, which is an array of objects. And I want my elements, which is going to be an array of elements. And to do that, I can map. So again, the thing I'm going to create is going to be my what do I call these things? My message element array by taking my default chat log and mapping each message object, right, that's what I'm working with, into some kind of value. I apologize, it's wrapping around a little bit. Cool. Well, here we go. Our transformed is now going to be a new element, which we want to look like one of these things, right? A message item. It's really basic. Whose message data will now be that message object, right? Because we're going through each element in my array, getting each object and passing that object into this message item as this message data. And then, of course, we return the transformed. Because we're building out an array of these message items, we need to make sure we also give each one a unique key. As unique key, I'm actually going to use this timestamp because two people might send the same message, but they're not going to likely send them at the exact same moment, at least how our server is going to run things. So I'm going to use the timestamp as sort of the unique identifier. So this message objects timestamp is going to be my unique key. And with that, I've got my list of message element, my message element array, and I can simply render that message element array inside of my div. And now I've got all my different messages showing up on the screen. And again, this way I can modify my default chat log in order to change sort of scaffolding or templated work that I want to do. Or otherwise, I've got a nice set of demo, like a nice just set of content that I can use to be able to sort of see if my page looks correct. Okay. Let's see. This is a bit of scrolling. It's kind of annoying. I mean, I really want, if we go back to what our Discord thing looks like, we really want our messages and our channel list kind of side by side. So that's fine. We can do that. By going back to our app where we laid these things out. And we can say, I want these two things to be next to each other. And the easiest way to make them next to each other is to put them inside of a flex box. Again. So I'm going to make this a flex box. And ta-da, now they're showing up next to each other. And we get something that looks kind of like this. The padding could be fixed. Like we could do some adjustment and styling to make it look a little bit nicer. I'm not going to deal with that in this video. We'll have the cleaner versions for sort of the next steps and next iterations of our application. Because in this case, we're really just focusing on getting React building, but we also need to make it look kind of nice so that we're not like going cross-eyed staring at our old app. Great, there we go. There we got a whole bunch of messages. So the last thing we wanted to do to make sure that we've sort of got something up and running is we wanted to make sure that we did have a place for us to post new messages. So we want to make sure we had our composing form. So we want to have some element after our array of messages that's going to be this compose form. No, his save's going to break. That's fine. So I could put the compose form inside the message pane, but the compose form feels like it might be doing its own work because there might be a lot of like validation and work that I want to be doing in terms of tracking what the user's typing in. So I'm actually going to go ahead and make a separate component for that compose form. Export function compose form props. They all look the same. Again, we can format what this looks like. I'm going to jump ahead. Let me cheat a little bit and just kind of copy and paste what I want this to be from my notes. So again, I'm just going to build out a compose form that looks like a form. It has a form element. It's got some divs, it's got text areas, it's got buttons inside of it. It's kind of just going to look the way we want. I'm loading in a material icon thing, which we can get set up inside the other piece as well. And there's our compose form. Will now show up. Oh, we exported it, which means we need to make sure we import it in message pane. So importantly, right, the thing to note here is that I can have, it's not only that app is the only person who ever imports components, right? Message pane can import stuff from other places as well. So I have my compose form. It says, here's my form. My form is used by the message pane, and the message pane is used by the app. So when I want to say, what is my form? Let me see, there's my form at the bottom. Looks, it's like a little form that we can hit and send, make that it can show up. So when someone says, I want to show this form, what should it look like? Is we can begin to say, great, like what's my page look like? Say my page is an app. It has the header bar. Well, what's a header bar look like? Well, a header bar looks like a div. Oh, sorry. My header bar looks like a header with an H1 inside of it. Great. What's the rest? Then I have a div that contains a channel list. What's a channel list look like? We go through that. What's a message pane look like? Well, message pane looks like a div containing an array of message elements. What's a message element look like? Oh, it's one of these items. And then it has the form after it. What's that look like? So that we're able to build out all the components for our application and get the sort of thing up and running and generally structured. Again, this is us just getting started. We'll start adding in more activity. We can clean up the styling. We can add more content as we go. But this is how we can start thinking about what are the components we might build? How do we structure these components together? And then how do we be able to manage the different content and the different sort of props and data in through that in order to be able to display our page?